want you to be very aware that I did not come up with the ideas in this PowerPoint. All ideas, as well as the language, are taken from Perspectives on Argument, a book written by Nancy V. Wood and James S. Miller. And then again, all this information is from Chapter 1 in that textbook. The purpose of this book that they've written, as well as in the course that you are taking, is to help you participate in two types of activities. First, the evaluation of arguments that you encounter, and that'll be the first part of the course where you are reading arguments from others and then responding to them, analyzing them and responding to them, and then the formulation of arguments on your own. And so that's really our last major assignment, where you're going to be working on your own essay, putting forth your argument on a particular issue. So that of course, there are many different definitions of argument, but in this book, the definition that is given is this one. Argument deals with issues, ideas, or topics that have not yet been settled, that invite two or more differing opinions, and that are consequently subject to question, debate, or negotiation. And the goal of any argument is to bring about change in an audience's initial position, no matter how small that change may be, on a controversial issue through a traditional or consensual model of argument. So think about this again. You're not focused in an argument on being able to totally persuade someone to come over to your point of view, but you do want to be able to make them at least open their minds a little bit to what you have proposed, a point that you have made, maybe a personal experience that you have connected to the issue. Something about it has made them think a little bit differently about the issue. As far as traditional argument, as Aristotle explained it, a person making an argument should find all available means of persuasion to convince an audience to change positions and agree with the arguer. So again, that's a traditional model of argument that many people believe kind of is the only one. And if you have listened to the TED Talk, that's what they're talking about when they say the argument is war. You're going to win, right? You're going all out to win over your audience to your perspective. And so, right, this is a traditional model of argument with which we are all very familiar. There are different types of that. Public debate, all about public debate. Two people or two teams debating each other. One's going to be the winner, right, and one's going to be considered the loser in that situation. Courtroom argument. So you're going to have a defense attorney, a prosecuting attorney, and then there's whatever the decision is by the jury or by the judge. One would think that one of these attorneys is the winner, one is the loser. There's single perspective argument. And so that's more like, let's say that we just had the Democratic National Convention, the Republican National Convention. And so when there's one person that comes up there and gives a speech trying to convince the audience that one of these candidates is the best one to vote for in the November election, then that would be single perspective argument. They are trying to convince the audience. They maybe won't know until after the election is over whether they have been successful in their argument or not. And then there's one-on-one everyday argument, when you argue with your friend maybe about what restaurant to eat at for lunch, or with a family member about whose turn it is to take out the trash or wash the dishes, something like that. But another form of argument, there's not only traditional argument, but there is consensual argument. And in the consensual model of argument, arguers create the possibility of agreement by acknowledging different points of view and working to identify one view or a combination of views that are acceptable to most or all audience members. So in this model of argument, a win-win or compromise outcome is the goal rather than a win-lose outcome. So the idea that, you don't have somebody feeling like they have totally lost, someone has defeated them in the argument, but instead that each individual can feel like they have come away with a little victory. The different types of consensual argument consist of dialectic, and in this case, dialectic means more like the Socratic method, where there is argument, where there's a question asked, and people try to respond and support their answer in the best way possible, and then somebody else does the same thing, until by the end they have come to some kind of agreement on this topic. Academic inquiry is when, like someone, let's say that I would write an essay about, let's say, symbolism in a short story, and I would give my support from the text and maybe from what other people have written to support that. And then, of course, I wouldn't consider that would be the only way that you could read, say, the symbolism in that story. Somebody else could come up with another valid way of looking at the symbolism and support that. And so if we could agree, both of these are good ways of looking at the symbolism and interpreting the meaning of the symbolism. Then there's negotiation and mediation, which we're familiar with when it comes to, let's say, labor unions and companies, businesses, where there's going to be a disagreement about what maybe the salary that people should make, or their insurance or things like that, and there is negotiation for each side to try to be able to like some of the parts of the contract that people are going to work under for the next few years. Then there's internal argument. So we all have that, where we argue with ourselves, and then we have to decide, which of the options that we're considering would be the best one. And, we're not going to consider ourselves either a winner or a loser. We could think, we've come up with the best plan possible for ourselves, or the best decision possible for whatever that issue is. According to Wood and Miller, there are 6 conditions that should be met for an argument to work best. The first one of those conditions is to have an issue. And this issue should be one that has not yet been settled, or that has become unsettled in some way. If you think about the issue of abortion, after Roe versus Wade became the law, when abortion became legal, many people thought that was over, right? That everything had been decided about that. And yet through the years, there have been people very unhappy with that decision, and so it has become a very controversial, heated issue in the U.S. in recent years. And then it has to have, or it should have, the potential to generate 2 or more views. You always want to remember that there's not just a pro and a con, right? There are many different views usually on a controversial issue. It's not just either for or against something. You can have, again, all kinds of views along a spectrum, right? From, again, extreme one way to extremely another way. And then the second condition is to have an arguer. And that arguer is someone who is motivated to initiate the argument, someone who is going to take a particular position on the issue, and then someone who's going to be willing to work to obtain and consider information that is relevant to the issue, and then someone who then is going to communicate that position to others, whether it is in person, whether it is through the internet, whether it's in writing, however it is that they may choose to do that. So this should really be number 3. Number 3 should be the audience. And so an audience should be one that is willing to listen or to read and consider new views. So if you have an audience but they're not, have any kind of open mind to listen to the argument that you're making, then it probably will not work as well. And this audience needs to be capable of understanding, thinking, questioning, discussing, and answering. Right? So maybe, you're going to have a serious issue that's going to affect people, like, let's say, healthcare. Well, you don't want to have an audience of, let's say, middle school students, because probably, they may not understand all the ramifications of the issue of healthcare in America. And then the fourth, very important condition for argument to work best is that of common ground. And so the arguer and the audience have to find something that they can agree on. Now, it doesn't have to be a huge thing, but if they agree on everything, there would be no reason to argue. So let's say the issue of, let's say, gun control. And so maybe the arguer and the audience have very different positions, but let's say that they're both concerned with children being safe at the school, at the public school they attend. So maybe they could find, in that common ground that they have, they could think about guns and how that could work best for the safety of the children. And then they can find this common ground through common interests, ideas, experiences, motives, or values, or even through recognizing common friends or enemies. And Wood and Miller point out in this book, in this chapter, chapter 1, that recent research suggests that one vehicle for establishing common ground in argument is through narratives, with each side relating personal experiences and stories. So people respond better and are able to make connections with each other when they hear their stories, their personal experiences. When you're just talking about abstract ideas, in hypothetical situations, it is easier just to stick to your original idea rather than to be able to open your mind to somebody else's perspective on the issue.